You are.
All right. Today I'm going to be talking to you about John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and we're going to analyze the strategy of peace. Now today, if I'm successful, you will better understand JFK himself, the speech, the genius behind the speech, and its overall impact. So we will begin. All right. So by a show of hands, how many of you thrive under pressure? Okay, a few people. Okay. So you'd say that you encourage others, you're calm and collected, and you're disciplined even when on the inside you're a little bit terrified. Now, I want to keep your hands up if any of you have prevented a nuclear war. A couple people. Okay, so I was a little surprised by that. We have a few exceptions, but that's JFK. JFK was not only someone that thrived under pressure, but he prevented a World War III, which to this day has not happened, so go JFK. Now, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was president during one of the arguably most stressful times in our young nation's history, the peak of the Cold War. He met with his Soviet counterpart, Nikita Khrushchev, who was not exactly a personable guy. He went to the United Nations, slammed his shoe on the desk, and said, "We will bury you!" This is the guy that he met with and had discussions. So, not exactly the most enjoyable time, but he saw that that was his duty. That's what he was called to do as President of the United States. And he was president during the Bay of Pigs. Now, the Bay of Pigs, for those of you that don't know, was a botched and ultimate military disaster that was supposed to be the U.S. supporting guerrilla troops in Cuba to overthrow the communist regime of Fidel Castro. Now, John F. Kennedy inherited this mission that was created by Eisenhower, and though he was skeptical, he decided, okay, I'll go along with it. And so, he thought that everything would be under control and that this wouldn't be a direct threat to the Soviet Union, and that we could take out Fidel Castro discreetly while installing peace and harmony within Cuba, but ultimately that failed. And JFK decided to go before Congress and admit his defeat, own up to the fact that this was his fault, even though Eisenhower was the one that made this his brainchild, and so JFK went forth with that. So overall, just as a glance, we're going to see that we're going to be looking at the speaker himself, the speech, context and background, and overall impact. Now the speaker. Now, for those of us that understand who JFK is, there's two parties. There's people that know JFK is the person that was from Boston, and he went to Harvard, and so everyone thinks, oh, it's the president with the funny voice. Or people think of him as, oh, the president that was assassinated. And while that's tragic, that's what we have today. We have people that either see him as this funny guy or this person with a stoic background that was killed in an untimely manner. Now, ultimately, I think we need to see that it's neither of these things. That's not the legacy that JFK deserves. So he was born John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He had 9 siblings. He was Roman Catholic Irish, and he was a war veteran and hero. Now, you might see the detail of being Catholic as a minor thing. You might think, Justin, like, this is Texas. There are plenty of Catholic people, like, yeah, we're at a Lutheran university, but chill, dude. But ultimately, this was huge, as JFK was the first president to not be an old, white Protestant male. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but this was very controversial at the time. And so people would ultimately not vote for JFK just because he was Roman Catholic, and just because he was Irish, because there was that kind of prejudice in America at the time. Now, ultimately, we can see that he rose above that prejudice, became the president of the United States, and went on to have an amazing career, an amazing legacy, and create a great speech. As a war veteran, he fought in World War II and saved 3 lives of drowning sailors. Now, he saved three sailors that were rammed by a Japanese patrol boat, and actually swam 3 miles while carrying someone strapped in his mouth, dragging the person as they were tied to the strap. So, yeah, needless to say, JFK was on the Harvard swim team. So, a little bit more about him. He went to Harvard University. He married a socialite. Jacqueline Jackie Bouvier, and he was the youngest president ever elected. And ultimately, he was assassinated in an untimely manner in 1963 in Dallas, Texas. And I thought that this was a good shot because it represented a more natural and more candid JFK that people don't understand, or people aren't used to seeing, they're not familiar with. bit of context and background on the speech itself. The speech is called Strategy for Peace, and it was made on June 10th, 1963. It was held at the American University, and it urged peace during such a stressful time. Now, a lot of speeches we see today urge some sort of political motivation. They say a call to arms. There's fear-mongering. There's some sort of like drive to get people going, a paranoia. But that's not what JFK called for. He called for us to look inward and analyze ourselves and try to find peace within America before we go pointing fingers at other people. Now, a huge part of this speech was that during it, he created an announcement for a nuclear test ban treaty. Now, at the peak of the Cold War, this was huge because ultimately before this, there was no communication going on between the Soviet Union and America. And so here we can see a picture of the commencement speech. Now I'm going to read to you my favorite part. Examine our attitude towards peace itself. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept this view. Our problems are man-made. Therefore, they can be solved by man. And man can be as big as he wants. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe that they can do it again. Now, this is an incredibly overwhelming, optimistic speech. We can see, not only in this excerpt, but throughout the speech, there's huge repetition and huge reinforcement on the idea of peace, the word peace, peaceful. And you know, every time that war is brought into the speech, it's seen as foolish, as primitive. And so that is the message that JFK is getting across to the masses. And people looked up to JFK at this time. This was a time where people really looked to their leaders to see what they should do next. Further content. Now, in the speech itself, JFK calls for no Pax Americana. Now, in the ancient Roman Empire, there was a program called Pax Romana. And so the Roman Empire decided that we will have peace across the world because we'll own the world. We'll take over every piece of land, and that's how we're going to create peace. And JFK sees the ridiculousness of this and says, no, we're not going to try to take over any more land. We're going to keep to ourselves, and we're going to cooperate with other people. And as I said earlier, there was no fear-mongering. And you often see that in speeches today, and I think that's a huge reason why this speech is timeless to this day. And a big part that I really admire is his quote of saying, we begin by looking inward. Others were saying, no, JFK, we shouldn't be negotiating, we shouldn't be compromising because the Soviet Union needs to compromise first. They're the ones that are in fault. But he says no, we need to begin by examining ourselves. Once we examine ourselves and see that we're true to our own message, then we can call out the other camp. So, impact. Negotiations between Russia and the United States, and Britain were actually successful after this speech. And so we saw that this test ban treaty was successful. It was a huge gesture of goodwill to the Soviet Union, and a hotline between Washington, D.C. and Moscow was created. So this increased communication, and in modern times, the New York Times and the Scientific American Journal have both created overwhelming praise for this speech. An old speech with modern relevance. Now, whether or not you agree with it is one thing. And I'm definitely not trying to be political, but I find that really hard as a political science major sometimes. So, in 2015, there was the Iranian nuclear deal, a very controversial issue in which Secretary John Kerry and his counterpart in Iran met to discuss negotiations for Iran to continue its nuclear program that the world had condemned, with the agreement that no nuclear missiles would be created and that there would be reinforcement and oversight from the international community. Now, some people said Obama was being weak for installing this, and that he should have attacked Iran, and that we should have sent ground troops, and that we should have had airstrikes. But if we're going to look at JFK and the great legacy he created, we can see that our current president is going down the right footsteps and the right track to lower tension and to create a world of peace. So that's what we need to continue looking for. And then ultimately, JFK once said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. So it's time we begin to look inward.